We've talked about hacking. Now we're going to talk about attacking, cyber attacks. Generally speaking, cyber attacks refer to efforts to harm, modify, destroy, or take over a cyber technology. Now, these methods of harming, modifying, destroying, or taking over cyber technology have changed over time. They've changed from early strategies and early forms of viruses and malware to now more sophisticated types that can take over an entire system. As we think about these strategies and their evolution over time, one thing to bear in mind is that different scholars have tried to understand them through different lenses, from criminologists to psychologists to engineers, information technologists, philosophers. They've looked closely at these varieties of cyber attacks. What we need to do is to look at them through the multiple lenses of these different disciplines. But when we look at them through our own lens, one thing to think about is how much do you spend each year on virus protection? Nothing? $50? $100? That seems to be the going rate for your laptop or PC. And the reason we spend that money is to keep others from attacking our computer. I use the word malware. You've heard of the word malware. Have you given any thought to where that word comes from? It comes from the phrase malicious software. It's much easier to say malware than malicious software. And while we're going to talk about cyber attacks separately from hacking, it's important to bear in mind that some hackers might actually hack in order to attack. But you don't actually need to hack to attack. So cyber attacks is bigger than hacking, although some hackers might hack in order to attack. There's many different strategies that are used by offenders to attack a computer system, to attack a computer, to attack cyberspace. You can come back to Myers and Myers, Powers, and Faisal, their taxonomy of cyber adversaries report, and there they also looked at different cyber attacks and showed some very useful ways to understand these cyber attacks. And these are attack types are ones you've most likely heard of. What Myers has done is talked about with colleagues, talked about the subtypes of each attack type, and provided a fairly useful, simple definition of each. Because there are differences between viruses, worms, trojans, and so on. We often may get them confused, but a virus is simply a self-replicating program that replicates through infected files, and it's typically attached to an existing program. So viruses, if you think of when you're not feeling well and you get a virus, and that virus can replicate through others and get others infected, that's essentially what a computer virus is, and the subtypes would include infectors and the files and macros, and if we were in a higher level class, we'd go more in detail into these subtypes. But the point here is viruses are like a disease spreading through infected files. Worms, in contrast, are self-replicating programs that replicate through networks or emails, and you don't need any user interaction. It's just something that, if you think of how a worm plows through the dirt, worms can plow through cyberspace without any connection, without any user interaction. And botnets and network software are strategies or subtypes, I should say, of worms. Trojans These are programs that are made to appear benign that serve a malicious purpose. So a Trojan traced to the idea of the Trojan sneaking in and the sneaking in the Trojan horse and surprising the opponents through that deception. It's the same thing here. Is that the program is made to look like it's just a regular program, but it actually gets snuck in on the computer, and that program snuck in there with a malicious purpose. There's also the buffer overflows, which would be a process that gains or crashes another process by overflowing by buffer overflowing. There's denial service attacks, and that's an attack that prevents legitimate users from accessing a host of the network, and the subtypes there would be the network and distributed host denials of service. There's also network attacks, which what occurs here is the offender would have an attack based on manipulating the network protocols, and these attacks are typically against users or networks. These would include the things like email phishing, spoofing, web phishing, session hijacking, and so on. Physical attacks are attacks based on damaging the physical components of a network or a computer, and these could be the basic sorts of physical attacks, or using some sort of energy weapon or something like that to attack the physical components of a system. Password attacks are attacks aimed at trying to figure out another person's password. Might be guessing, might be exploiting implementation, it might be using force to get the password from someone. Whatever it is a type of cyber attack, a password attack. And information attacking is attacks in which no damage is carried out, but they're simply gathering information and learning about a potential target. And these subtypes include things like packet sniffing and host mapping and port scanning, and just gathering data about a particular individual business or component so that they're able to use that information later against the individual that the data had come from. So Myers, again, with colleagues, has been able to demonstrate these various attack types, cyber attacks. There are others. There are, for example, what's called ransomware. Ransomware is a cyber attack that installs malware and holds a computer system hostage until that ransom is paid. And the offender, cyber offender, usually as part of an organized unit, would find ways to make that payment anonymously. And whether it's through MoneyPack or some other process, it's believed that healthcare systems are targeted the most for ransomware attacks, and it's reported that some of them do pay in order to get their system back. It's the type of malicious software gets into the system, and the security of that system is the officials are told, we're not giving it back until you give us X amount of money. Well, healthcare or other businesses might be attacked. Individuals could also be attacked through these ransomware strategies. A popular one a few years ago was an FBI ransomware, where the offenders made it look like they were the FBI, freezing a person's computer, turning their webcam on, and then telling the person, you need to pay your fine or we're going to come after you. The FBI didn't operate that way, but people did pay through MoneyPack and this anonymous way to transfer money. Web defacement is another variety of cyber attacks. Hacking into a computer system in order to deface a website is what we're talking about here. Who's doing this? Tom Holt's research has looked at cyber attackers, and in an article he published a few years ago with Strumsky, Smirnova, and Kilger, they pointed out that the people who introduce malware and other types of cyber attacks are similar to hackers. Most of them don't have a lot of technical skills or knowledge. Those that do have the skills and knowledge tend to form social networks with one another. They know one another fairly well and they bond with one another. But again, most don't have a lot of knowledge. They don't report having a college education, although Holt is quick to point out that they may not be completely honest about what they have. And what he and his co-author suggest is that they operate within a collegial subculture that encourages information sharing and values innovation and skill. So that, remember the subculture, they would come back to that subculture and that notion that they're working together to learn from one another, but also to show their skills and to innovate within that subculture. Why do people engage in cyber attacks? Quite simply, it depends on the type of cyber attack we see. Defacement is certainly going to be more about political motivation or some sort of revenge where someone, it's essentially, if you're riding on the subway or driving down the road and you see that people painted something on the side of a building or something like that, a message that they're providing. This is vandalism in cyberspace, and it's often politically driven. Denial of service typically is either political or economic driven motives. Worms or viruses, often done so that people can just show their knowledge because they want to demonstrate, look what I'm able to do. I can write code and I can create harm with this code, and they get sort of thrill or excitement out of that. Whereas ransomware is done for economic reasons, and that's simply why individuals would do it. They hold someone's computer system hostage until they get money. And it's tied to what criminologists call routine activities theory, which we'll talk more about later. But at this point, we can just say that this is a theory that says crime occurs when you have three things in the same moment in time. You have a motivated offender, a vulnerable target, and the absence of a capable guardian. With ransomware, you have the offender that's motivated, the target is the computer, and the absence of the capable guardian is the virus software that they're able to bypass in order to hold a computer hostage and in order to gain money from the person that owns that computer system. How do other disciplines view cyber attacks from this multidisciplinary lens? Well, information technologists would be interested in protecting information and encouraging individuals to protect themselves. And they'd be focusing on the information or the data within that computer system and how we can protect that. Business discipline would be interested in how we can protect businesses from cyber attacks and how we might actually develop businesses that protect against cyber attacks. And on the one hand, it's the bottom line is money and how we protect the business from losing money to cyber attacks. On the other hand, how do we make money from this? Philosophers would question the laws and policies used to create situations where cyber attacks occur, and might even question whether some of these attacks are justifiable, or at least how do individuals justify those attacks in their minds. They would explore privacy rights and how, in some ways, accessing and attacking that information might be demonstrations of values that limit privacy or extend privacy in ways that call into question whether that is best for our overall culture. Engineering would be concerned about how we secure networks and systems and the critical infrastructure. Computer scientists would be interested in how to create malware and virus software and how we develop that software, whereas criminal justice scholars might be focusing on how, as a criminal justice system, we can control these sorts of attacks. None of these disciplines will control it. We need to work together. And work together in generating knowledge, generating information, and generating appropriate responses to